Hey guys, welcome to the YouTube channel. Today's video is about the toll of collecting. And just to start off with, there's not going to be any Geraldo in this, there's not going to be any stuffed animals. I understand some of you have a problem with it, so we're pulling back a bit on that. But instead, what I'm going to talk about is the toll of collecting, because a lot of us as collectors don't realize the toll it takes on us over time. And some of you may have realized in recent months, I've been downsizing. I've been putting my collection into sleeves, and something like this comes out. So I get something like this that's in a box, and, movies are sleeved. And I know some of you may have a problem with this, but, I can easily access anything really. But the idea behind that is one of the tolls of being a collector, and that's space. Because space is a premium. Space is something that we have a finite amount of. So when I look at my space here, I had shelves that were way up to the top as of recently. I have now adjusted these, but they were way up and I could fit another shelf in here, so everything was kind of jam-packed in. The reason behind that was because I just had too much. Since I've actually moved some of the Blu-rays into the boxes, I've actually had room to adjust and make room to where I don't need to shove my hands in anymore and push things apart to get them out. I just go from the top, pull it down, bang, got it out. So space is always an issue as a collector. You always have a amount of space that you need to have to house a collection like this. And a lot of us as collectors will still buy even when we have no more space. And that can sometimes be a problem as collectors. That can be something that we need to look at as collectors, is like, we can buy this release, but do we have the space for it? Now, some of you who follow me know recently I've sold my Star Wars collection. There was an idea behind Star Wars that my DVD versions are better than what I was getting on 4K. Now, some of you might say visually it's not that, but even then, some of the older Star Wars films, like the 2006 limited editions, are actually better than what I was getting on 4K because they contain the original theatrical version. Now, I know not everyone likes the original theatrical version. I know some people are just like, Star Wars, I don't care. I don't care if it's Yub Nub or whatever. I just want to watch Star Wars. I don't care in what form. I just want it to look good and sound good. And that's fine. Nothing wrong with how someone wants to appreciate a film. But for me, I was very much a fan of, I want the 2006 editions. I wasn't too big on the sequel trilogy, so the 7 through 9, I wasn't too big on those. I wasn't too big on The Mandalorian or the TV shows, so I also had the TV shows, Obi-Wan Kenobi, all of those shows on 4K as well. I wasn't too big on them, and outside of the original trilogy, like not the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, I wasn't really watching Star Wars on 4K, and even then, they had changed some aspects, like Puppet Yoda. So for me, it just felt like a smart decision to sell my Star Wars collection on 4K to prioritize a version that I do like in the DVDs. And I'm sure it could even be said for like Blu-rays as well. Some people might prefer the Blu-rays. So as I've done that, I've made more room in the sci-fi collection. I've made more room to kind of expand if I wanted to. That being said, there's also stuff in here that I'm like, is Blu-ray good enough? There's a lot of things that have doubles of Blu-rays that I kind of do think about, do I need the 4K? Am I really watching it as much as like appreciating 4K? Like, am I really watching it? Am I really appreciating that little bit of extra resolution? So when I look at that, I really look at the overall arc of collecting. I look at how I do it. I look at what I'm adding to the collection. Star Trek is one of my favorite TV shows and movie franchises of all time. So I add Star Trek. But that being said, I don't know how much I'm actually watching Star Trek to actually appreciate, do I need the 4K or was Blu-ray just good enough? And when you look at stuff like that, you also have to take into account, I might have stuff like Dawn of Justice, for example. This is a great example. Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice. I have this version, even though this is the one I don't really like. This is the Nolan version. I do like this version with the aspect ratio and less kind of Whedon aspects. But I do like to have both. And that's a question about bloat in the collection. And that's the next topic. Bloat in the collection can really be a problem. When us as collectors are collecting everything, we collect every movie you can get your hands on, even if we don't know about it, even if we've never seen it, even if we have no intention to watch it. We buy it because we collect. And that is a toll of being a collector. You want to have something that resembles a streaming service, that has range, that has depth. And so you go out and buy extra stuff that you probably don't need. Some of these aspects are like old, like this M. Night Shyamalan movie. I did buy it to watch it for the first time. I didn't watch it prior to buying it. And I bought it saying, you know what? I will probably buy it. Now, I didn't like this movie. Now, you might say, oh, well, that's not too smart to do. But as a collector, I probably got it for cheap enough to say, you know what? I can justify buying this. There was also a time where I just wanted to have every 4K that was unreleased. On any given day, I looked at what was being released, went and bought it. And that becomes a problem because now I am kind of stuck with a version of old that I'm probably never going to watch again. And that's a problem from a stance of, if I am buying stuff, I should be watching it. It should be a reflection of me. It shouldn't just be in a collection to bloat the collection so it has a mad background for YouTube. But, you know, a lot of us do that. A lot of us buy it. A lot of us want to have something that looks visually appealing, something that looks visually cool. And I admit, it does look visually cool to have a background like this. But is it a reflection of me? And that's a lot of the thing of being a toll of a collector. You kind of look at your collection sometimes and you come in here and look at it and you say, is this a reflection of me? Or is this a reflection of what I think people want to see from a background, or what people would want to see when they walk into a room like this? There is a lot of aspects. I have been rearranging as of late to try to make this collection more in line with me. It's part of the reason why I sold Star Wars. The DVDs for me are the definitive versions, because those 2006 editions do contain them, the original theatricals. Even though they're pulled from Laserdisc, I know there's problems with them. I know there's better things out on the internet, don't need to tell me. But there is also a mindset that there are shows in my TV collection off camera here, like I'll just grab one off that I'm looking at right now, Downton Abbey. I have never watched Downton Abbey. I probably am never going to watch Downton Abbey. I don't know why I have this, but I probably saw it for cheap enough to justify buying it. And so often when you get into that mindset of, I'm just buying this for the sake of buying it because it's cheap enough, so many collectors fall into the trap of, well, I don't have it for the collection yet, I might as well add it. And when we add stuff to our collections, we kind of forget that, A, are we ever going to watch it? Most likely not in the case of Downton Abbey. I know people do like the show. I'm not saying anyone shouldn't like it. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying, for me, I know I'm not going to watch it. I did like The Crown, though. I did like Netflix The Crown, and that has got a physical media release. But I also am not a fan of Downton Abbey. I don't think I'm going to watch it. I don't know what it's about. I don't know if I'm going to like it. I probably won't watch it. So why is it in the collection? And this is another bit of a toll of being a collector. You have stuff in the collection that you know you're never going to watch, as I said with old, or that you know you probably shouldn't have bought to begin with. And that also adds up to cost. The cost of a collection like this on 4K is astronomical. I've done videos about it in the past. I might even link one at the end of this video, in the end screens. But I've done videos about the costs of my collection over time. The Blu-ray cost that used to be down the bottom, or that's now in boxes, and also the overall cost of this. Now, they're a few years older. I've added to it since then, but I believe it was in the range of like 50,000 over years. And that can be quite insane. That can be quite confronting when you add every little expense up and you start saying, whoa, I spent that much over what, 5 years? That's kind of insane. That's like 10,000 a year on 4K, you know? Sometimes more, sometimes less. Now, given you do time sales, you wait for JB Hi-Fi to do their sales, you wait for Amazon, you wait for whoever to do their sales. So you're not buying at the top of the market most times. Unless it's something you really want, then you will buy at top of the market. But what I'm talking about is, a lot of us kind of buy and we don't monitor how much we're spending. Now, I've monitored and kept very accurate records of where I spent money, at what times, in which stores. I've got all the metadata, so I tracked it all. But even then, I didn't know I was actually spending that much until I did the calculation and said, yo, this is quite insane. Like, what am I doing here? What am I doing with this collection? And at a certain point, as a collector, you hit a point where you're kind of like, I've got everything I could possibly imagine. Every film in here is a reflection of what I collected at a time. And there's also parts of me that's like, am I actually going to watch it? Am I going to go back and watch it again? One thing I have here is, Don't Worry Darling. I actually quite liked that movie. I actually did quite like it when I watched it. I don't know how likely I am to watch it again. It might be one of those things I watch on a rainy day or something. But I don't know how likely I'm going to watch it again. I don't know if I'm going to go back and watch it again. Now, given it's not something like one of my favorites, which is Titanic, where I know I'm going to go back and watch it, I don't know where I moved Titanic to. This is the thing with rearranging, you kind of lose track of where you put stuff. It is in the biopic. Now, the reason I do biopics in, like Titanic, it's not a true story. Jack and Rose is not a true story, but I put it in biopics because Titanic is a real ship. There's a lot of characters in this movie that are based on real life characters, like Mr. Guggenheim and like J. Jacob Astor and Molly Brown and all that. So there's enough in here where even outside of the Romeo and Juliet stuff of Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio, Rose DeWitt-Picator, and also Jack Dawson, there is still enough in here to where I would characterize it as a biopic, even though it's a very clear drama. And when you get to a collection like this, some people have asked, why don't I arrange my collection in alphabetical order? And this is another toll of being a collector. Because if I had everything in alphabetical order, each time I added a new movie, I would have to shift shelves along every type of shelf when I add something. Now with this, I have categories. So I have like Australian category over here off camera. Right behind here, I've got horror, television over there, Western here, comedy here. And what happens is if a section becomes too big, like if my Pixar collection over here kind of becomes too big, what I can do is I can say, okay, that's become too big. Let's switch that out with musical down further. Let's move musical up. So it gives me the option to move the collection around actively while keeping them in alphabetical order within their respective genres. So I look at this and I'm kind of like, I have a system here that I'm happy with. Now, given I could make it better, it could always be better. Any collection could always be better. But when I look at this, I'm always like, do I have enough? And also, is the system working for me? As I said, I knew where to look for the Titanic release. I know I could also work in an alphabetical sort of thing in amongst everything, just go look for the T section. But for me, I know, okay, I would have put Titanic in biopic. It's kind of based on a true story. Look in biopics. If I wanted to find, DC, obviously DC is right there. If I wanted to find something that has a sci-fi essence to it, like a King Kong or a Jurassic Park, I know that would be kind of sci-fi. I used to have a fantasy category, but I've merged that back in with other categories now because the fantasy category kind of can double as sci-fi. Harry Potter is very much like mystical, but in a lot of ways that could be justified as like a sci-fi movie. In a lot of ways, it is kind of like magical, kind of along the same lines. So I would say, yes, that can go under the aspects of science fiction. Some people might say it's more children's category. Some people might say, oh no, you should have a fantasy section. But that's also a thing of having different categories for different things. I've also merged things like Assassin's Creed that I would consider a fantasy back in with this. The Hunger Games as well is somewhere here. I think Hunger Games might have been put in with action. So there's a lot of things where Hunger Games might be characterized as a sci-fi, but I've put it in with action because it's a very high action movie. It's very much like they're on an island, we all know the kind of essence of what the Hunger Games is, I hope so. But when I look at this, I look at something that reflects me, and I look at something that I'm trying to constantly get to reflect me. And that's another toll of being a collector, knowing what to sell and when to sell it. When I look at my collection, I'm looking at, is it a reflection of me? Do I need to have it? Am I watching it? And do I really need to have it in the collection? In the case of Star Wars, no. I've sold a lot of Dragon Ball recently, like the Dragon Ball Z Dragon boxes, the famous DVD versions. I had all of them. Sold them all. Decided I didn't watch them enough. Decided I had enough of the individual releases, the individual Funimation releases with the original broadcast dub on them, to where I didn't really need to have those Dragon boxes. And while, yes, the Dragon boxes can be more visually appealing and stuff like that, I just felt like I wasn't watching the Dragon boxes. Anytime I watch Dragon Ball Z, this is going to annoy some of you, but I actually watch it dubbed. I watch Dragon Ball Z with the original Funimation dub. I'm a fan of Bruce Faulkner's music. Now, some of you might say, oh, you should be watching the Japanese. I do watch the Japanese too. I can appreciate the Japanese. I can appreciate the work of Masako Nozawa. And, that's more in line with what Toriyama would have been saying he wanted as part of the series, and especially the adaptation. Now, given Toriyama didn't have as much to do with the TV shows, but I still think you can appreciate both. But my preferred version for that is the dubbed. Now, when it came to Super, I watched that in Japanese, so I'm more nostalgic for Super in Japanese. But this is the thing, I kind of can pick and choose different things. I can appreciate Dragon Ball Z in English while also appreciating Dragon Ball Super in original Japanese. And you can have both. You can have your cake and eat it as well, you know? And there is so much in this collection that I'm kind of like, it's cool to have, but also, am I watching it? Am I appreciating it? The Toll of a Collector is also about mental health as well. As collectors, we can kind of get into a mindset that we have to have everything. We've got to collect it all. Got to catch them all, you know? We got to catch everything. And there's a part of me that's like, yes, I wanted to have everything early on. Every time a release came out, I tried to collect it. I tried to go out and buy it as soon as possible. I would write down every single new release that came out, go to JB Hi-Fi on a sale, and buy every new release. There were sometimes shopping trips that would cost me 300, 500, maybe even 1,000 sometimes, because you get into that mindset. One of the instances that have happened recently is A Nightmare on Elm Street has come out in a box set. Now, there was a question I asked myself where I asked, do I need to have the box set of this on 4K, or is the Blu-rays good enough for the rest of this? Outside number one, I do really like number one on standalone. And there was the question I asked saying, you know what, outside of number one, it's less likely that I'll watch anything else besides like maybe up to Dream Warriors. Again, and I might only do the watch through of everything once in a blue moon, you know? So I really kind of watch number one the most. 2 and 3 I watch somewhat regularly, and then the rest are kind of like add-ons. Now, it might be nice to have that privilege of having everything on 4K, but as I said, I've got number one, the one I watch the most on 4K, and that's good enough for me. And sometimes you just hit that point as a collector. You kind of get to that point where you have everything. You have everything you could ever want. You have enough to where if the internet ever went out and you lost everything, blah, you might actually be happy with just saying, you know what? Even if Netflix went offline, even if everything went offline, I have a movie collection here that reflects my tastes. And that's kind of a good thing, because then you can kind of say, okay, I might have too much here that I might not watch. Like, I've never watched Bob's Burgers. I might shock some of you, but I've never watched Bob's Burgers. Why do I have the Bob's Burgers movie, you know? These are questions I ask constantly. And as a collector, I'm constantly interrogating my collection. I'm constantly coming in saying, why do I have that? Why do I need that? Does it have a place in my collection? Or should I sell it, go through and do a bundle of things and say, don't need that, but I'll like this, or I'll keep this one because it might be a reflection of something I might watch later. But also, there's a lot here that I probably am never going to watch. I don't know how likely I am to watch 50 Shades of Grey, you know? It's not my kind of franchise. That being said, I have all three of them, and that might be something to sell, you know? These are the questions you need to ask, and the questions you have to do as a collector. Because, as I said, we have a finite amount of space in our collections. It's why I looked at the sleeve route as something that Serial at Midnight did, and I was very much inspired by Serial at Midnight's. I know some people don't like the way he did his collection. I know some people don't like other collectors that I follow. That's fine. We all have our own collectors that we like and relate with. That's the good thing about YouTube. There are so many different creators out there that you can go and follow. You can go and figure out what suits your taste, who aligns with you, and what you kind of like, what appeals to you as a collector. When I come in here, I looked at Serial at Midnight's route of doing the sleeves for the Blu-rays, and as I said when I was doing it, I've done videos about it in the past, I keep everything in there. Outside of the plastic covers, I keep every bit of detail. I keep everything. I keep the sleeve, the actual any in artwork. I keep everything in plastic envelopes. So I'm actually being very careful about the way I do it. I'm kind of trying to make sure that this collection, A, is not getting oxidized or whatever it is. I think it's oxygen can kind of make the discs rot over time. So I've got them in the plastic sleeves. I've got them in the envelopes. So second layer of hopeful protection. And some might even argue that inside a box, so an extra layer of protection, I'm trapping air circulation as well. So that kind of should help the disc long term. And some people might say, but it might get scratched. I'm being very careful to not move the discs too often because A, they're in an envelope so they won't be moving anyways, but I try to make sure that the collection is looked after. And that's another thing as a collector and the toll of collecting. You constantly need to be checking your collection. Disc rot can happen. I've seen some Blu-rays since I've been tearing down and putting them in boxes that have actually got some oranging haze sort of thing on the back of Blu-rays. Now, I do know that when it kind of starts to go orange, that's oxidizing. It's kind of oxygen getting in amongst the layers of the Blu-ray. it can be consistently linked to disk rot. And I know that can happen. I have seen it happen. I have experienced it happening with DVDs in the past. But for me, I am aware of that. And the idea is that eventually I'm going to go through and audit the collection again, do them into an Excel spreadsheet, analyze disc quality. Is this thing, is this okay? Is this rotted? Is it scratched? I want to make sure of every little detail so that if I go through a spreadsheet, I know everything that needs to be looked at, everything that might need to be repaired, something that might be written off at some point and just discarded or donated or something. So there's a lot of aspects to where the toll of being a collector is everything. You've got to be aware of everything. You've got to be aware of what you're doing, what you're collecting, what you're spending, what type of space you have. Also, what version you're getting. This is another toll of being a collector. You need to be aware of, like, with Jurassic Park, for example. I've talked about this recently in many different videos, but Jurassic Park recently got a re-release on 4K. Now has Dolby Vision, now has Dolby Atmos. This one does not. This is the earlier release. This one had digital noise reduction. I believe the newer one does not have digital noise reduction. But also there was a part of me saying that for me, when I watch Jurassic Park, I'm watching the DTS DVD. Now, a lot of you might ask, what does that mean? Doesn't these versions have DTS? Now, these versions do have some version of DTS, maybe even other different audio options. But the DTS is more aligned with what was heard in cinemas in 1995, I believe. Believe that came out in 95 or 93, 95. It might have started filming after Schindler's List. But do you understand what I'm saying? I feel like there's this aspect of this where I'm kind of like, I am not watching the Jurassic Parks like this. I am more or less watching them on DVD because the sound is just superior in my view. And some people even stand by the Laserdisc, saying Laserdisc is the way. It's more aligned with what was heard in cinemas, and that analog sound is just kind of more aligned. So there's a lot of different ways. There are people who stand by VHS copies of Mad Max, and I'm Renom's friend, say these are the defined ways. There are sounds that didn't make it across to Blu-ray, 4K, DVD even. So there is so much you've got to be aware of as a collector. And part of the toll of collecting is you've got to be aware of everything. You've got to be aware of what you're spending, what you're collecting. Do you have the titles already? There are so many times where I've went into a store and bought a secondary copy of something saying, oh, I don't know if I have this. I might have to buy this one. And then you get home and say, oh, I've already got it. But it was $1, so I'll keep it, I don't know, $2. So I'm not really going to run back and go through the trouble of going through a refund process just to get $2 back, you know? As collectors, especially buying secondhand, you kind of just go like, yeah, whatever, I've got 2 copies. If one copy breaks, I've got a second copy. And that's kind of what I want to put to you guys as well. Like, I kind of want you to understand, as a collector, we all have right and wrong ways of collecting. There is no right or wrong way of collecting. We all have our kind of ways to do it. Some people arrange alphabetically, some people arrange in categories, some people don't even have categories and just say, you know what, I don't care, I just want everything on a shelf. I don't care if it's arranged. There are so many things. I have DVDs off behind camera, I have Blu-rays and TV shows differently arranged. So I go through the process of sorting. Some people don't sort, some people do. Some people don't mind, some people do. And there is no right or wrong way of being a collector. At the end of the day, we are all in a collector's market. We are all part of this collecting community. And when I look at my collection, I'm constantly thinking, like 24 up the top, it is a reflection of myself. Let me tilt this up if I can. We will try to do a tilt up, even though I know it kind of annoys some of you. I imported this from Japan because that version of 24 is only available in Japan, where you get all the TV series up to, I believe, Live Another Day or Live... What's the other 24 series? There's a 24 series that's like... Not Live Another Day. Is it Live Another Day? I'm positive it's Live Another Day. But either way, that's basically the complete series. Live Another Day. It is Live Another Day, and it's also got Legacy in it. Surprisingly, it's got Legacy. I've never watched Legacy because it didn't have Jack Bauer in it. But that's what I'm saying. I kind of am along the line of 24 is one of my favorite TV shows, so it's worth the effort of going out and buying that. There's also The Sopranos you can see up there. Went through the effort of buying that. I've got Bulwark up there and The Wire. I am meaning to watch Bulwark through, and I do need to watch The Wire at some point. I know I haven't seen The Wire. I know. Don't get on me. But there is so much here. Like, one thing up the top that I've been probably thinking about selling is the Halloween collection. Now, the Halloween collection is something that I'm kind of not really watching. I don't really care for Halloween. Now, I know that might say, oh, how can you be a horror fan if you don't watch Halloween? I do watch Halloween. I watch number 1. And outside of number one, I'm happy to say, yeah, I watched Halloween, and if I'm going to watch Halloween, I just watch number one. And I think some Halloween fans are even like, oh, well, you know, if you're watching this timeline, you need to go these movies and watch in this order. And then if you go this timeline, you go this order. And then if you want to watch the first Halloween, then the second Halloween, then you go up to the newer ones. There's all different timelines. And I just don't care enough to do that. I've also mentioned Stranger Things. As a collector, I know I'm probably not going to get Stranger Things, the newer kind of seasons up to season 3 through like the final season on 4K or Blu-ray. So I might consider selling Stranger Things, but for the time being, I've got them in amongst the collection. They're there. And as you can probably tell, I've done a rearrangement in here. I have shifted things around. And that's the thing, as a collector, you're constantly shifting things around in your collection. You're constantly making room. You're constantly saying, is this a horror or is it something else? Is this a fantasy or can this be categorized as a sci-fi? Can this be characterized as a action? You're constantly kind of thinking about your collection, about how does this all align? How does everything in this collection align? How does it all come together? How does it all look? And when I look at it, I'm kind of like, I like the look of it. I do like the look of it. That being said, I know there's stuff in here that's bloat. And I know there's stuff that I'll probably have to sell. Because I look at this and I'm saying, like even Lord of the Rings, I know Lord of the Rings has alterations to it. I know Peter Jackson put a haze over some of the scenes. I know he's done digital noise reduction to this Lord of the Rings on 4K. I would rather just watch the DVD at that point. I would rather just go and track down the definitive editions or whatever they are on DVD and watch those. And so I know I'll probably won't watch Lord of the Rings on 4K. I know for me, and I've said it in a lot of videos, that the Terminator in here, which is in sci-fi, the Terminator 2 transfer on 4K is not the version I like. This one I don't really care for. So this might end up getting sold at the end of the day. I do love Terminator 2, it's one of my favourite movies of all time. But when I watch Terminator 2, I'm going back watching a Blu-ray version or a DVD version of it. Because the version on here is just not aligned with me, and it's not the version that reflects me and the version I want to watch. True Lies, on the other hand, it has digital noise reduction. Outside of digital noise reduction, they don't make too many alterations. So with True Lies, I'm happy with that transfer. Same with The Abyss. But there are hit and misses here. And that's where I want to end it today, guys. I think the toll of being a collector can be daunting at times. And sometimes you have to kind of ask yourself, what do we do as collectors and what do we kind of bring to the world of collecting? As me, as a YouTube collector who gets on here and puts my videos up and sometimes talks to I know I was going to bring him on the camera, but sometimes I talk to a stuffed animal on here just to lighten up the videos, because sometimes it can be quite boring here listening to one guy talk for 20-30 minutes. That was the idea of bringing Geraldo onto this video. There is a lot of times where I'll ask how to keep these videos relevant, how to keep them interesting and engaging. And as a YouTube collector, there is times where I looked at the background and said, I need to expand this because I'm competing against guys like Films at Home. I'm trying to be in a market as Angry Video Game Nerd. I'm trying to be in a market as Serial at Midnight and all the other big collectors around the world, Metal Jesus and all that. All of these collectors who are big time YouTubers have been doing it for a lot longer than I have way bigger collections, have way cooler backgrounds in some instance. I saw one collector, I forget his channel's name, but he has his whole basement. We don't have basements really much in Australia, but he had a basement full of just movie shelves, and they're just kind of like rows and rows and rows of them. And then he has even the metal poles up above him, the scaffold, not scaffolding, what's it called? The rebars or whatever. You kind of see he's got collectibles on those as well, and that's pretty cool. He has probably the coolest kind of setup in all of YouTube. And then even in the gaming space, you had Last Gamer there when Joel was still doing his videos. Obviously, he doesn't do them anymore. He deserves his right to privacy. We will respect Joel. But this is what I mean. The YouTube community can kind of be daunting and you feel the need to compete. And that's where I want to end it, guys. What do you think of my collection? What do you think of the setup? And what do you think about these topics? I want to hear what you have to say. I will put a couple end screens about the spending here and over here, and you can watch both of them. Watch them both, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.